Hi everyone! I usually make these types of videos for Halloween, but I've played so many horror games ever since I started streaming that I might as well make it a separate compilation series. I'll be using some of the VODs that I saved from Twitch here, so I guess this is also going to be a face reveal for those of you who've never seen me in my socials and my Discord. As for the rest, I'll be using gameplay that I recorded outside of streams. Oh, and all of the games in this video are only on PC, so I won't be mentioning the platforms they're available in. So yeah, let's get on with the video. First is BABBDI. I don't think it's as scary as the other stuff I've played for this video, but it's an uncanny game that's really interesting. And since it was free on Steam, I decided to download it. So in this game, you play as a person who's trying to leave the town of BABBDI, a forsaken district. The whole place is surrounded by huge walls, so the only way to get out of there is to get a hold of a train ticket. BABBDI seems like a first-person walking sim at first, but it doesn't take long for the game to reveal itself as a 3D platformer. Like, the first item that you get in the game is a baseball bat, but it's not used for combat or anything. It's used to hit surfaces, causing you to bounce off them. It's a really useful item that helps you get around, since the whole place is practically a brutalist parkour playground. While exploring, you'll find collectibles hidden around and strange NPCs to talk to. The NPCs were a little weird at first, but I got used to them after a while. They fit in BABBDI's atmospheric world really well. They made the place feel lived in, but at the same time, very oppressive. It was one of the reasons why the game intrigued me so much. I almost didn't want to leave because of how immersed I got in BABBDI. I managed to achieve the ending in under an hour, but I decided to keep playing it for a little longer, just to explore and even get some achievements. If you like short, weird games that offer an interesting world to explore, then I highly recommend BABBDI. The second one is the Outlast Trials. A couple of my friends were looking forward to this game, so I decided to play it with them earlier this year. It ended up being incredibly fun, despite it being obviously an early access title. I didn't really pay attention to the story, to be honest. I think you play as a prisoner who has to go through a set of trials or something to be set free. All I know is that the game was really fun to play with my friends. You can play each trial by yourself, or in a team of up to 4 players. There are different classes to choose from, along with their own skill trees, so you can place things like traps or heal other players. Every trial requires you to complete different tasks while avoiding and hiding from enemies. So yeah, the enemies are just like the ones in the previous Outlast games. They can't be killed, they can only be stunned, which really made the game scarier. Like, my friends and I worked together to power up generators and solve some puzzles, but I feel like we mostly just spent that time arguing and freaking out whenever the enemies were nearby. It was such a chaotic experience. Like, I'm sure that those of you who hopped into my streams witnessed everything. I think the only downside to the game, at least when I played it after it was released, was how repetitive it got. Like I mentioned earlier, it feels like an early access title. I think there were only like 3 trials the last time I played the game, and there were 5 levels for each one, which were really fun, but it made me want a bit more after 10 hours of gameplay. I checked if the game had anything new as of this video's release. There's going to be a major update on Halloween that provides a ton of new content. I really hope it's going to be good. But yeah, I highly recommend the Outlast Trials as it is. I'd say it's one of the most fun co-op horror games that I've played so far. Next is the Lunch Lady. If you're into any horror game that involves finding pages and notes while something scary chases you, then this is exactly what the game is about. You basically have to go to school and steal 10 test answers for the final exams without getting caught by the lunch lady. It's another horror co-op game that I played with friends, except I never saved my stream's VOD, so I'm just using footage that I recorded in single player. I honestly have mixed feelings about this game. Like, it's really fun with friends for maybe an hour or two, but it starts to get really repetitive and bland. There were different maps to play in, but it was always the same thing. You just have to search lots of empty rooms, hoping to find keys, pages, or medkits. The lunch lady gets more annoying the more pages you collect too, so it made progressing through the game really annoying. It feels almost like her AI would spawn somewhere close by when we had a certain number of pages. The game stopped being fun when I ended up just playing with one other friend instead of a whole team. She wouldn't leave us alone. Like every time one of us got out of our hiding spot, she acted like she knew exactly where we were. Escaping from the school was fun the first time, but it just wasn't really rewarding, so I ended up not playing any more of the game. Lunch Lady's super cheap though, so I'd say that it's only worth it if you want to play a couple hours of the game with your friends. The fourth game's the Karaoke. Those of you who've seen my previous horror game compilation videos know that I'm a fan of Chilla's art games, so naturally I got even more of them in this list. The Karaoke is about a high school girl who goes to karaoke. She goes there to have fun with her friend, but then really bad stuff starts happening. Yeah, I can't say much without spoiling everything that happens, but it's a very creepy and unsettling story. I remember playing Chilla's Art's previous title, The Closing Shift, and mentioning how that game's threat was a very real one, which made it much scarier than any other game that involved ghosts and monsters. The Karaoke follows the same path, so it made me really anxious when I was playing the game. But hey, if you ever decide to play this, you can always just play the awkward karaoke minigame and ignore the weird things happening in the background. My favorite thing about the karaoke is how it had multiple endings. The story can take a completely different turn depending on what you do throughout the game, which made it so much more memorable and exciting to play through. I highly recommend the Karaoke. It showed me just how much Chilla's Art's games have been improving in terms of mechanics and story. The fifth game is Inside the Backrooms, another 4-player co-op horror game that I played with friends. The goal of the game is to escape each level of the backrooms, solving puzzles together and avoiding the enemies that roam around. I think this was the first co-op horror game that I streamed with friends, so it was even more chaotic than when I tried the Outlast Trials. The enemies in the game are based on creepypastas. They all have different ways of attacking, so you have to learn how to avoid them while you collect items and solve all the puzzles in the level. It gets really tricky because the layout of the Backrooms maps can get really confusing. It's the reason why the setting is both my favorite and most disliked part of the game. The similar looking rooms and hallways were spooky, but it made it so much easier to get lost in. I don't know how many times I was trying to stick together with my friends, but then some creepypasta monster spawns and we all lose track of each other. It was a lot of fun, but sometimes the enemies would get in the way so much that we either had trouble progressing through the game, or we all ended up just dying and restarting the whole level. And some of the puzzle solutions would change every time we started a new run. It really hindered our progress, but it was still really fun. I'd say that this is the type of co-op horror game that's much easier to play through if you have a full party, just like Lunch Lady. Solving puzzles and going through all the levels will still be challenging, but not as much as when you're playing by yourself or with less people. The game's still in early access, but we managed to beat all 5 levels of the game in around 8 hours earlier this year. I'd say the game's absolutely worth it, even though we nearly lost our sanity from replaying levels multiple times. Next is Missing Children. This one is about a detective who's searching for missing children that are victims of bullying. Just like the Karaoke, Missing Children has some new mechanics for a Chilla's Art game. You have to fast travel to different locations and visit the victims' families, asking them about the incidents and investigating their household for clues. I don't really have much to say about this one, but I really liked it. It just had the same stuff as previous Chilla's Art games. Odd NPCs with uncanny JPEG faces and spooky environments. As creepy as this game was, I'd say it was more sad than anything. It explores things like child abuse, so seeing hints of it in some of the households just felt depressing. But I was really curious to see what happened next, especially since all the missing children seemed to be connected. I played Missing Children for about 2 hours to reach both endings. I'd say it's one of the weaker Chilla's Art games for me, but I still enjoyed my time with it. The 7th game is Demonologist. Don't ask why my friends are naked, by the way, it's their place style. This one caught my attention on Steam because it seemed very similar to Phasmophobia, except it seemed more polished. I got my friends to try it out with me, and it ended up being terrifying. So Demonologist is another co-op game that I played with a couple of friends. Your goal is to explore haunted places, and use your equipment to exorcise the evil spirit that haunts the place. Just like Phasmophobia, you have to stock up on ghost hunting equipment before you start a game. Oh, and heads up, I played this game for over 3 hours, so I can only comment on my experience with the first map. But yeah, I thought that the starting haunted house map was incredibly detailed, since it was filled with antiques and other items. Most things couldn't be interacted with, but it was still really cool compared to similar, more empty-looking locations in other indie co-op horror games. The best part of this game is that the ghosts can interact with the environment in really cool ways. They shatter light bulbs, mess with furniture, and appear in unexpected places. My friends and I would freak out so much that we would just hide in one corner or run straight back to the van, which is like a safe spot with all your equipment. The jump scares and ghost activities started to get predictable after a while though, especially since we only played in one map. Leveling up and unlocking things in the game just seemed grindy. The other maps seemed way too expensive for my friends and I to afford, despite playing for a few hours. But yeah, that's my biggest complaint about the game. It was still fun though. I just think that you should know what you're getting into before purchasing the game, especially at full price. It's still in early access, but I think it's best to wait for a sale to buy this one. The last game is Parasocial. This is the latest Chilla's Art game that I played as of this video's release. Parasocial is about a VTuber. She streams herself playing horror games every night, but one day she gets a stalker and things get really creepy. What's cool about this game is that you get to play games within a game whenever she started streaming. It was really fun for me when I streamed it, since I was a streamer streaming and playing a game about a streamer who's playing a game. Anyway, Parasocial is definitely in my top 3 Chilla's Art games now, next to the Closing Shift and the Karaoke. Playing this was just nerve-wracking because it had a real threat, just like the other Chilla's Art games that I loved. I don't want to spoil it too much, but seeing the stalker become more and more intrusive, both online and in real life, was just nerve-wracking the whole way through. It felt like I couldn't trust any of the characters that I encountered in the game, but I was so hooked on the story that I wanted to keep playing. I loved all the choices and endings. It even had cleverly placed references to their previous games, which was really cool to see if you've tried their other stuff. So yeah, Parasocial is just an amazing horror game overall. I think my only real complaint about the game is how dumb the main character and her friend were at times. But I guess the game wouldn't have been like 3 hours long for me if they just avoided everything on day 1. Let me know what you thought about the video. And once again, thank you to my patrons at Patreon for supporting my channel. More horror games. I feel like I played so many of Chilla's Art games both last year and this year. I'll have to look for even more stuff to play for Halloween while waiting for them to release new stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.